The Menscape
The
Podcast.
Menscape Podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
So, good afternoon and welcome to the August edition of the Menscape Podcast with the one and only Mr. John Loftus, sponsored by Ancient Spiritual Tours, which I guess we better mention as well. How are you doing, John?
I'm alive, which when you reach my age, Carol, is an achievement every
You
day.
certainly are. I can see that. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm good overall. Yeah, very good.
Well, firstly, thanks for giving up your time to join us. I'm sure you've much wisdom to share with us. Why won't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Right. Where do I begin? In a month's time, I'll be 77, if I'm still around. How far back do you want me to go? I went to school in Limerick at Ongar College eventually. And before that, I went to Lorrigan National School. And I have probably an achievement there. And the two schools that I did go to are both since closed. Maybe they've seen it all. I don't know. But anyway, when I left school, I went into university, didn't do that well there, wasn't concentrating like I should have been after getting a scholarship and what have you, and ended up actually going to London to begin hotel management. Didn't like it after a couple of weeks, and eventually ended up as a barman in a pub called the Churchill Arms in Churchill Street in off Kensington, between Kensington Highway and Portobello, that region. But anyway,
so what part of London is that? My geography of London's not great, but I meet and talk to a lot of Irish people. And
it's Kensington, which is a pretty well-known area. It's Kensington Church Street, which
is that central?
It's pretty central, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty central, yeah. So I had a very good year there. Spent a lot of my Friday, Saturday nights at the Roundhouse. So I saw some of the real 60s legends play there. The Roundhouse was I think it's still in operation. It was an old converted railway station where they turned the trains around, and hence you had the Roundhouse. And it was just a great place to be back in '68.
So we met for a cup of tea about 8 years ago, and you had this wonderful story about how you saw Jimi Hendrix. Was that where that was?
That was in the Roundhouse, yeah.
In the Roundhouse.
Jimi Hendrix.
Do you remember much of it?
Oh yeah, I can remember most of it. It was loud, it was good, it was great. I would have seen people like The Who there, and Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green at the time, who was the main man, and so many more. The Rolling Stones, I saw them in Hyde Park with their free concert when Brian Jones passed away, and a lot of other much more famous people than me. I was very lucky in that early on in my career there, I met a guy who, Finn Nielsen was his name. He was a Danish diplomat. He was really young lad, like myself. And one day he mentioned the musical Hair was about to open in London. And I said to Finn, I'd have loved to go there. Oh, he said, why you not tell me, John? He said, we get tickets for these things all the time. So anything in London that I needed tickets for, except the opera, because they always used the opera tickets. I wasn't that interested anyway. But for shows of one sort or another, I went with great time. As a VIP very often.
Can you see behind me in the window a picture
of Jimmy, is it?
Of Jimi Hendrix himself.
Oh my Christ, brilliant.
This was one of my prized possessions when me and my ex-wife decided to separate and break up.
Yeah.
I said to her, I said, "Can I have the Jimi Hendrix photo?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "God love you."
Yeah, fantastic. He was super. Managed by Chess Chandler of the Animals. At the time, he was the guy who saw him while the Animals with Eric Burdon were playing New York, and he was recommended to meet this guy. Brought him to England, and he became a massive success.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I still think
stayed around for too little time.
Yeah, don't get me too caught up in this, right? But I've been digging around, and I still reckon he was bumped off by the CIA or the FBI or whoever. They go into someone's hotel, they bump them off, a bit like you could say they did with Dolores O'Riordan in the Cranberries, and then they make it look like a suicide or a drug overdose and then they tell that to the papers, and everybody thinks, oh well, because they were a rock and roll star or a musician, that's a very believable story.
Yeah.
And they buy into
100%.
it and let it go. But he was such a massive influence in the hippie movement in the 60s and 70s that the CIA and the FBI deliberately wanted to address and derail that movement.
You could have also said the same, possibly even more so, in the demise of John Lennon.
Another one.
Again, it was too much of a coincidence to see they had a guy there to anyway.
I don't know if it was his quote originally. Thank you, sweetheart. Left my cup of tea.
Yeah, well, I've settled for water here.
when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace, was a quote attributed to Jimmy, I believe, at Woodstock. And he was such a hugely influential sort of figure, not just for being a brilliant guitarist, he was also a brilliant lyricist. You listen to the lyrics of, Spanish Castle Magic and Hey Joe and stuff. He was actually a genius poet, as well as a lyricist, as well as a musician. And he certainly captured my mind, heart, and soul as a student myself when I was in Leeds in the 90s,
Unreal, yeah, fantastic. He was just such a ball of energy. It was the energy that he gave off that was unreal. But around then you had so many, maybe not as good as Hendrix, but still, I mean, Pete Townsend of the Who was absolute lunatic, but again gave off this incredible energy vibe in relation to just about everything he did. And you had so many tremendous artists then.
So you're in the heart of London. You've got a mate who can get you tickets to any gig, and you're at I suppose at the time when the Kinks were big with Sunset, with the fashion and everything that was coming out of London was cool. The music.
I spent some days in Carnaby Street. Yeah, I had to say.
So you must have had some pretty good karma to be in the right place at the right times with all.
Just a fluke.
You must have been a good boy in a past life, is it?
I'm not too sure what it was, but that's where I ended up. And just, I mean, lots of things just happen. I have no notion why I walked into Finn Nielsen on a given evening, and for him to tell me who it was, and just for me to mention the fact that I would have loved to go to see her. And the rest is history.
Did you meet your wife there, or did you make any?
No. I've met my wife many years there, so she's quite a deal of years younger than me.
Yeah.
Many moons later, I came back home for Christmas to 1968, and just before I'd left London, I picked up a newspaper on the Underground where Aer Lingus were looking for staff. And I brought the newspaper with me and filled in my application. And I heard no more about it really, thought that was it. Then I was at home doing various bits and pieces here and there. I didn't go back to London at this stage because I decided, okay, I'd better start thinking about something that might sustain me going forward. And then on Fool's Day, 1969, I get a telegram telling me to report for work at Aer Lingus Shannon the following day. Now, being Fool's Day, I thought this...
Someone was trolling you.
Yeah, not only that, this is 3 months after I'd applied. So someone somewhere has set me up here.
Yeah.
So I duly showed up the following day, and then I spent the next 12 years of my life with Aer Lingus.
So it was no April Fool then?
No, it wasn't. Ended up in a place called Load Control in Shannon, which was a great place in many ways, because you had to work out weight and balance of aircraft and what have you before computers, or very basic computers at least, and some flight planning. And Shannon was the place to be at the time, because it was a small operation. So other airlines that flew into Shannon didn't have their own staff on the ground, which they would in larger airports.
Yeah. So
you got to learn the ropes and how Air Canada, Trans TWA, as they were at the time, since then gone, Pan Am, biggest airline in the world since long since gone, and all sorts of others, including Russian aircraft and Germans and what have you. And they landed in Shannon, and we had to do the handful of us were there able to do this. You learned how each of them operated. So it was fantastic. I got quite a few trips during that time for the likes of, let's just pick out one, where I remember Air Canada coming in through. I'd been told that the day before, if I was asked if I was available to do it. Flew into Shannon in the morning, was going on to Frankfurt. I joined the plane in Frankfurt. They were bringing a new load of passengers there, re-landing in Shannon, and I did the paperwork the whole way through. So just that was one example of lots of these things. Equally, we had so many staff on the ground in New York and Boston, Chicago, and while they were on holidays, because again, they were quite a small number, I often flew to New York for 4 or 5 days or a week to cover for these people. So that was also a huge experience.
I bet.
Yeah, and then we had free flights, of course, which were a great help. But then I had to say that we were probably not being paid enough money to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a very glamorous industry to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the TV programs or anything to go by. Was the romance on the airlines?
Well, there was a romance always, but not the romance that I eventually settled for.
Would you believe me if I told you, when I first came to Ireland about 23 years ago, I was living with my then girlfriend, now ex-wife's parents, in a place called Ballywire, out near Dromoland Castle on the old back road into Shannon.
Right.
And that was there was a kind of an airport facility there on the estuary, you know, with the kind of towers with the lights.
Belly Green is there. Yeah, Belly Green, GIREE.
Belly Green.
Yeah. And
so peaceful, so beautiful.
Yeah. And they combined the weather forecasts and how weather was going to affect various things. And we got reports regularly from Belly Green, as well as, of course, from ATC, which was air traffic control.
So where did life take you after Aer Lingus then?
Well, it started with me being in Aer Lingus. Right. A great friend of mine was a guy called Paddy Ryan, who operated the 2 Mile Inn,
Yes.
as it was at the time, a fantastic venue. And they were open 6 nights a week. And I approached Paddy about the idea of running an airlines club, as I called it, there on a Monday night, disco really. So we started that, and even though they pulled it about 2 years later because they considered that we still weren't getting enough numbers, even though I was doing really well at it. And since then the place closed down, not because I left, but anyway, it was because on my Monday night I was earning more than I was doing for a full week with Aer Lingus. I decided, okay, there are other options. So I left Aer Lingus after 12 years in 1981. And at that stage, I had tried a thing. I won't call it going to partners. Partners can be a disaster in lots of ways. I picked a partner with me to do a thing called the Limerick Lady Festival. And I approached Denis Allen, who I knew quite well, to write the song. And Denis Allen wrote that song for me for the festival. And the guy...
You're a lady.
Limerick, you're a lady is correct.
Thank you.
And I remember my partner, that guy, I won't mention his name at the time, when he heard Denis say, Limerick, you're a lady. No, he said, that won't do. We want more than Euro lady. He considered it was Euro lady rather than you're a lady. We wanted to incorporate the world. No, Denis said, you are oh, yeah. So at that stage, I should have pulled the plug. I didn't. We were left, it went very well for 1 year. And I decided either he goes or I go. And he was unwilling to go, so I left. And so he took it on for the next year, didn't see out the year. I knew it wouldn't, but anyway, c'est la vie.
So it sounds like you always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit.
Correct. That would have been my, yeah. I got into nightclubs then after that, put together, well, first of all, in the Green Hills, I did Club Marché, which was quite successful. But then I put together with two guys called John McCarthy and Heyman Harris. Heyman, who would be a nephew, actually, of the great Dickie Harris.
Okay.
We put together Close Encounters in the Parkway, which was so far ahead of its time. I must dig up for you sometime, Carl, a copy of Disco magazine, which was a big English magazine, and where Close Encounters in the Parkway and the lighting system is carried on the front cover. Now, that was some achievement for a small town in west of Ireland, in this absolutely unbelievable magazine at the time. So, yeah, we did that for several years. Then Parkway was sold, unfortunately, after a couple of years. And I took all the lighting out of it, and I set up a lot of other places around the country, including Lismore Castle, or Lismore Arms, alongside Lismore Castle, down in Lismore, strangely enough.
I was there yesterday playing cricket for them.
Unreal.
Beautiful spot.
Yeah, I set up a place called O'Grady's in Gort. The Denny men down in Killarney. And then I pulled what was probably the best stroke ever. I were very good friends. In fact, I got married when I did get married, which in 1982. I got married down in Ballybunion because of this. I was approached by the owner, the manager of the hotel. The owner was a Dutch guy, about the idea of doing a disco in Ballybunion, starting at the end of September after the Listowel races, because Ballybunion just shut down after that, up to the Easter weekend, or the 1st of May, in fact, was what I actually did. The thing I took in the Easter weekend most of the time. And the place absolutely bombed. It was unreal. And all we did was brought in a mobile disco into the bar area, which was quite big. We'd arrive down at about 9 o'clock. Bars at the time, especially on a Sunday, closed religiously at 10 o'clock. This was a Sunday night gig. And by about 10:15 or 10:30, we'd have the people out of the place. And the disco lights would go on, what have you. And 99% of the people who went out of the place queued up outside to pay to come back in. So this was one of the craziest situations I've ever encountered in my life. So it was, it went extremely well. Trish, my wife, used to be our door lady there. And I had a couple of, we called them bouncers, but you didn't have to bounce anybody in Ballybunion. They were all well behaved.
I'll take your word for it.
And after about 4 or 5 years of this, other venues in the area started to say, well, this is a great idea. So what they did was they rented for everybody. So places like the Listowel Arms and a place in Ballyhigh and a place in Ballylongford all opened, ruining it for everybody. But I had absolutely fantastic years. In fact, I had my wedding down there. We had 287 people. We had the Central Hotel and the Ambassador Hotel where this goes on, fully booked for 2 days. And it was a ball because once you left Limerick, most of the people were from the Limerick region. And to go to Ballybunion, well, then you had to stay. It was going to be no way home or whatever. So it was fantastic. Best wedding I was ever at.
A friend of mine actually became a client for a while last year. I with the Right Coach, I work with people all over the world, helping them write their own books.
Right.
And I was researching the history of house music, which we sort of just assumed kind of began in Chicago in the 80s. But the house music movement kind of took root in the disco movement. So this came up, we were researching it and looking at it, and the influence of disco in the 70s in the places in, say, like New York, attracted the minority communities. So the gays and the blacks found refuge in the disco scene because they could go along, they could dress whatever they wanted, they could dance, and they could be happy without being persecuted. Because outside of that, they were kind of persecuted or made feel something wrong with them. So a lot of the disco movement began with your more off the wall sort of type people that weren't your typical sort of party goers. And as a kid, I remember growing up listening to LPs and vinyl of my parents, one of which was Saturday Night Fever, and the soundtrack of the Bee Gees movie. And this was just played over and over again. And I absolutely love it. I still love disco to this day.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, so the Bee Gees were unreal. Again, 3 lads from the Isle of Man.
Right.
Who went to Australia and started doing bits of music.
I thought they were from Manchester. Were they from the Isle of Man?
They were actually born in the Isle of Man. To my knowledge, that's the way.
Interesting.
Actually, I met Morris in my days in Shannon.
Right.
Because he was married to Lulu at the time, and Richard Harris had just released the film A Man Called Horse, which premiered in the Savoy in Limerick. And Dickie brought everyone, there was anyone, in to Shannon. So we got to meet lots and lots and lots of people. But I then met lots of people in Shannon, including Muhammad Ali. Who
was he like?
I met Muhammad Ali at the time I was doing the Limerick Lady Contest, and I had a bundle of business cards in my pocket, and he signed them all, maybe 20 of them. And then various people that I met asked me, "That's brilliant, Muhammad Ali's. Could I have one of those?" Yeah, I'm sure I ended up with none of myself.
You'd be rightly starstruck by him, I'd say.
Oh yeah, just such a big man. I met the great Paul Newman there. Your man that did Raymond Burr, the guy who did Ironside, the guy in the wheelchair. This guy was about 6'7" or thereabouts. A massive man, huge huge individual. Loads and loads of people who just were coming through, and you got to say hi, hello, how are you to a lot of these. And a lot of them would go to their way to say hello to you, which was good times.
I had a radio show back in 6 Mile Bridge around about 2011 or 12,
Right?
which I did with Pat Barry, and I had the opportunity to do my own radio show, which I called Legends, and I could focus on a particular band, do a bit of research, and then put in a bit of waffle of my own in between playing a few of their songs. And the first one I ever did was on the Bee Gees. And it was quite remarkable that they went from being so huge, they went from being literally unknown to them being a big thing after their third album, coming back from Australia to England. And then they were big in America. Then they were massive with the whole disco movement. And then they were literally abused and deplatformed by BBC Radio 1 in the 80s because there was a big sort of public turn off against disco and what have you. But your man, was it Morris or was it Robin? The songwriter, he's still in the Guinness Book of Records for having written a #1 song in 5 consecutive decades. And I don't think anybody will ever surpass that achievement. So they wrote some of the most beautiful songs and they became songwriters for other musical artists and stuff.
Yeah, and they came across as nice guys, good guys. You know, they anything I've ever read or seen about them has always been positive. They lost their younger brother very young. And the Barry and, sorry, I should say, Robin and Morris have both died quite young. And Barry is the only one, the oldest of them, that's still around.
So you're after meeting these movie stars, film stars, musicians like Jimi Hendrix, Muhammad Ali, and then fast forward a few years and we meet in Limerick to talk about Midwest mentoring. I'd love to know how you ended up doing business networking.
The Midwest mentoring thing came because disco was beginning to fade away a bit in the mid-80s. And I'm in Limerick one day where I meet a fellow called Jerry Dennis, who was the chairman of the Limerick GAA at the time. And he wanted me to buy a ticket for some draw they were doing. Big prize, I can't remember what the prize was, but the tickets were £50 at the time, which was quite a lot of money in the mid-80s. So yeah, I will go try because I would have gone to school with some of his younger brothers. And so what would you do? He said, what are we doing wrong? Well, I said, you're doing this all wrong, because what you're doing is you're doing draws, having the draw, any momentum goes out of it, you start and to do another draw. What you should have is an ongoing draw. Oh, he said, like what? Like I said, something along the lines of maybe £5 a month ongoing, and quite a decent prize fund, involve the clubs, involve the people in the county. She said, that's a very good idea. Would you be interested in doing it? I said,
you got a job for yourself, did you?
Yeah, just like that. And I spent 11 years with them. At the time, there was a Dubliner who was pretty well known. He was Noel Drumgoole, and Noel was the chairman of the Board Nagan, which is the Greyhound Board. And he was a great guy. And so I had free rein while Noel was around in relation to how I did this and the way I did this. And then unfortunately Noel died. And I was left with, let's say, not as easy to work with crew.
Right. It can happen, yeah.
Yeah. And you see, I would have always worked during all those times on a percentage basis. And all they saw as the numbers grew was that my percent or my money was rising. But their money was rising by
Unfortunately,
seven or eight times as much. But
they look at you like they look at you as an expense rather than an asset.
Correct. Now he has done it. He has set it up. We know how to do it. But anyway, to make a long story boring, I decided, okay, I have a contract with you. Buy me out of it. They bought me out of it. Not a high figure that I should have looked for. But anyway. And the funny thing about them, they come back into my story many years later. And I'll tell you, I'll bring up the draw when I talk to you about at the time. But at that stage, I went into, would you believe, insurance, because I had a great friend of mine who was also died, a guy called John Carrick from West Limerick, who used to say, always refer to me as Johnny Loftus. Johnny Loftus, you'd be brilliant at my job. You would be, because you're able to talk to people, you're able to get on with people, you don't upset people, you don't. So eventually he talked me into taking up insurance, which I stuck with for about 10, 11 years. And
so is that like home or car or life or
no, life,
mixture of everything?
Life inventions.
Yeah.
And I found it again brilliant to do. But at that time, after leaving the GAA, I was approached by a charity in Limerick to do something similar for them, which I did, and did it differently. Instead of doing a £5 a month thing, I did a £1 a week and did a weekly draw. And that took off huge. We had over 10,000 people contributing weekly to that draw, and all done by agents going door to door, and they're getting a bit of.
Are you allowed to say the name of the charity?
Yeah, the name of the charity was Lisnagry. Lisnagry out in Lisnagry, and then afterwards it became because they had objections to getting money out of a J.P. McManus fund from other charities that they already had their own fundraiser in place. They decided, okay, we'd better play along with JP because we'll lead him down the line. And we went to rehab instead. I knew the guy who was the main rehab individual in Ireland, or in the south at the time, from Cork. And so we ran that, and that ran pretty much the whole way through to 2019.
So you've been involved in networking, in sales, and insurance, and with the aviation background as well.
Yeah.
And then I guess
then we had some health issues along the way as well.
Yeah.
So in 1992, at the ripe old age of 44, we had just christened our fourth child, Tara, who was a special needs girl who later we were told had less than a 10% chance of ever sitting up or standing or whatever. And who in September goes off representing Ireland at Monte Carlo in Special Olympics. A tremendous runner, tremendous swimmer, tremendous basketball player. Now, she wouldn't be the brightest spark as regards numbers and things like that, but as regards being physically able to do all kinds of everything, she's brilliant. So anyway, let's go back to myself. We had her christening, and I woke up the following day feeling absolutely tired. Decided I drank too much, but it wasn't going away a day later. It had to be shivery. I went to my doctor. He gave me a covering antibiotic, and then make a long story boring, a couple of days later, my wife had insisted I stay in bed for a day or two. I woke up and I was on fire. She took my temperature. I was 107 degrees. That's enough to kill any human being. She rang the doctor, who rang an ambulance, and I spent a week in the regional in Limerick, where nobody really did know what was going on, because it was very rare, as it turned out. I was eventually diagnosed by a guy who became a great friend of mine, Con Cronin, who was attached to St. John's at the time. Con decided that I needed to be brought to Beaumont where it's explained to me that I've got something called good pastures syndrome. Sounds like something a cow might get, but not good. Where they got the word good from, I'm not too sure. But the upshot of what this is, Carl, is an autoimmune disease. And when you have any infection, your immune system kicks in, it creates white cells. The white cells fight the infection. And when the infection is beaten, a message goes back to the brain, turn off the creation of the extra white cells, all's okay. For an unknown reason, these handful of very, very rare diseases, the message gets garbled, the white cells continue to multiply and now attack you. So de facto, you're being attacked by your own immune system. Lovely. Which is an incredibly scary thing to A, get your head around, and B, to try to rationalize in any way. So to beat it, the only way they could do it at that time was to take down my immune system. They did this by a series of plasma exchanges. They were done for God knows how long. And when they eventually had it down, in which case I had no immune system, and I had simultaneously 7 or 8 lines going into my hands, one into an artery, I picked up what they called at the time an opportunistic strain of pneumonia. And now the cure became worse than the disease. I spent 2 weeks in intensive care. I spent 4 days on life support. So when I saw COVID and the people being turned around and twisted around in ICU, I was a soldier. It wasn't COVID, but I was 100% certain I was going to die. In fact, before I went into the life support situation, a fellow called Carl O'Neill was the respiratory man in Beaumont. And I have to say, I was under a guy called Joe Walsh, and Joe and myself became really, really great friends. And he brought everyone, there was anyone in the hospital, to see me and to offer their opinion and to come whatever. And I remember the day he was telling me that we're going to give your lungs a rest. I was just thrown down. You got a thing like a CPAP, which catches you like so, pumps oxygen at 3 times the normal level into you, and it's still doing enough. But the only part of me that was active was my brain. The rest of me was pretty much gone. And I remember as he told me this, that we're going to give your lungs a rest. We're going to put you on the respirator. I remember nodding away like that. And at that stage, at that particular point in time, if he had said to me, we're going to prop you up there at the end of the bed and we're going to shoot you, I'd have done the very same.
Taken it,
yeah. Because there was no point. I couldn't see any way out of this. And then 4 days later, I pulled the actual thing out myself. I had an out-of-body experience. I wouldn't have believed in these things, but I remember absolutely, as I'm talking to you now, looking from what seemed to be the ceiling of the room that I was in, which was next to this, and about 6 people in gowns all around the bed, and I'm there in the middle, and I'm slowly going down towards the bed, passing these people's heads out, and eventually I get into the bed. And the first thing that struck me was, I'm here, I'm back in my body, and I have no pain. But that didn't last long. Could have been 10 seconds, could have been 10 minutes, I'm not too sure. The pain and the soreness, as I said, I had simultaneously 8 lines into my arms, all administering something to me. This right hand turned out, it looked like a club. It was lost shape and what have you. Very, very scary time. And then the recovery. I was under a Limerick nurse whose name escapes me for the moment. Norris, I think. Anyway, she used to get me out of the bed and to get two nurses to each side of me to get me to walk. I wasn't able to move a leg one beyond the other. And the only way I got them to move at all for me was calling out the four names of my four kids. Evan, Craig, Kyle, Tara. Evan, Craig, Kyle, Tara. And one day I took off my mask to say to her, did she do her training in Auschwitz? That was as the nurse was, and she laughed at it. She laughed at the idea. So, but of course, what they were doing was good for me. They were making me get back. But in all, at that stage, Carl, to make a long story boring, I did 6 months in hospital. I went into around the 28th, I think it was, of May, and came out on the 25th of November, 1992. And the reason I remember the 25th of November, there was an Irish election that day. And on my way home, I stopped to vote. So that was, anyway, the upshot of all this was that this autoimmune disease had caused irreparable damage to my kidneys. They restored my kidney function to a particular level, told me I'd get between 5 and 10 years out of the kidneys, got in fact just over 7, so they were spot on. Then I did a year on dialysis. I did home dialysis and a thing called peritoneal dialysis, which is unreal. How, again, the geniuses that these people are. Someone along the way discovered you've got a thing called the peritoneum, which is almost a film inside your stomach, and that by putting liquid between it and the kidneys, they would do the same. It would do the same job that the kidneys do. This was staggering to think about it, but I worked away during the whole thing, did my 10 hours a night on this machine, had a permanent line in my side. I had to undo and do that, and had to be very clean about it. You had to be near a toilet or a bathroom, because you took on board 10 liters of stuff in the course of the night in 2 liters at a time. 2 in for 2 hours, drained off. Next 2 in for 2 hours, drained off. So hence your 10 hours, and you nearly have an hour between putting yourself on and taking yourself off. But again, I worked away, did whatever I was doing at the time. And
is there some truth in what they say, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
True, very true, very true. And then almost a year later to the day, I got a call. I was at a friend of mine's funeral, and came home to put on. He was very much involved, like myself, in Ballybrown GA Club, and I came back home for my blazer, and as I went in the door, the house phone went, and one of the lads, one of the boys answered it, and Dad, is for you. I said, who is it? And he asked them, obviously, bummed. And I said to Trish, what the Christ did they want with me at 8 o'clock of a Saturday evening? She said, it could be a transplant. I said, Trish, if it's a transplant, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go, because I have to do, I reeled up about, if it's a transplant, you're going. That was the response I got. Sure enough, on a trip to Dublin, which I had to leave straight away, I rearranged my life. I got all kinds of people to do call back favors, called this one, that one, and the other one. And at 10 o'clock the following morning, I got new life.
Did you ever meet your donor?
No. The donor would have been unfortunately killed. There wasn't life or live donation at the time, or it wasn't a big thing, at least. And what I will say, it must have been something like a crash or something of that nature the night before, because there was quite a lot of transplants done the following morning. Now, there could be 1 or 2 people giving because a person can give life to up to 7 people.
Incredible.
Very sorry, unbelievable. And you only, in the kidneys case, one person can give life to 2 people. I've only got 1 kidney. In fact, I've got 3 kidneys, but the other 2 are just there. They're causing no problem. And I'm left with 1 kidney, which, touch wood, is working extremely well, and has been and will be 24 years in my body on the 3rd of September.
Incredible. So it sounds like you've been through the mill.
I've been through the mill, yeah.
Yeah.
Through the mill, definitely. So, yeah, and most of the things that I have experienced, I got a bit of a heart attack a year ago, dislocated my shoulder a couple of months ago, and I'm waiting on an operation on that, but they're minor
So a
compared.
dislocated shoulder, a heart attack, and 1 kidney, and they still can't take you down.
No,
Is
no.
it? I've got some kind of brief questions for you, right?
Okay. So,
And this seems like a fairly
Interestingly.
obvious question. Have you ever written a book?
no. And often I have said I must.
Yeah.
I used to write a good lot of poetry as a young fellow. I have written stuff that I still remember, and intended along the way.
I think
So
there's enough there. I think, yeah, I'm not going
I should
to
probably
sell
talk.
you.
I should actually talk to a writer, as in.
There's a guy I know in Ballywire called the Write Coach, serves people all over the world, helps them write books. I'll
Yeah.
put you in touch with him.
Yeah, or better still, if we had a writer that would sit down and listen to me and
Like a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That night.
Yeah. Fantastic. Have you ever jumped out of a plane?
No,
Ever ridden a horse?
I have.
Driven a Ferrari?
Driven a Ferrari? No, I haven't driven a Ferrari. The closest I came to a Ferrari would have been my Celica XT or something to talk. Or I had a lovely Citroen ZX, which was one of these, when you turned the key, it lifted the whole car. You actually raised up about, and I used to bring a whole load of kids before there was seatbelt issues to match it, and they would literally kill each other trying to get into my car.
Have you ever eaten an insect?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Have you ever walked on hot coals?
No, I haven't tried that.
Have you ever been?
Maybe something like that by mistake.
Have you ever been abducted by aliens?
Not to my knowledge. No, there's a lot of people that would say that it's quite possible, in my guess.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What is your favorite smell?
My wife's cooking.
Oh, that's sweet. What do you like? What's your favorite meal? What does she make?
Fish. I'm an absolute addict for fish. All kinds of fish.
All kinds?
All kinds, yeah.
Nothing in particular?
Oh yeah. But I just love salmon. I love trout. I love hake. I love haddock. I love fish. I love fish.
What are your favorite books, and what books would you recommend to people, and why? As you know, we have a nice little section on books in the Menscape group, and usually we get a couple of books that people might recommend, books that might have changed your life. I don't know. Have you any books?
No, because my own life, in a lot of aspects, in a lot of ways, was very serious. I like to read people who can make me laugh, and Rory O'Carroll is the best. That's what's his name?
Rory O'Carroll.
Yeah, Rock. Oh Jesus Christ! I'll have to get you his name. But that's the name he gives himself in the book. It's totally based on rugby and the part rugby plays in Dublin society, and it's taken the piss the whole time. Very, very funny.
Let's have a look.
So look up Rory O'Carroll there. You can edit all this out.
Rory O'Carroll. Let's see now. There's a few Rory O'Carrolls connected with Dublin GAA.
Yeah, but Rory O'Carroll writer, Rory O'Carroll books.
Rory O'Carroll writer.
Or books, I would say.
Is he a journalist as well?
Yes, he is a journalist. This is what the guy was originally. His name.
Where are we? Was he born 1972? Irish journalist working for The Guardian. Written books on Hugo Chavez. He sounds more like a serious than a comedian.
No, that's not him either.
Interesting.
Because you see, the Rory O'Carroll, the reason he picked Rory O'Carroll is ROCK, right? And he calls his father, oh Jesus, yeah, I'd have to go. Look, leave it that with me.
I've got here, There Will Be Fire by Rory Carroll.
No, that's different. That's a brilliant book.
Yeah, it's not, Google's not.
No,
Maybe we've got something wrong.
Sorry, Ross O'Carroll.
There we go.
No, Ross. Jesus Christ.
Don't worry, we got there. Ross O'Carroll.
Ross O'Carroll Kelly.
Don't Look Back in Ongar.
Yeah. Ross O'Carroll Kelly, that's him. Paul Howard. Paul Howard is the guy's name.
Ross O'Carroll Kelly.
Kelly.
Ross O'Carroll Kelly. That's a tongue twister in itself.
Since you have the rock, ROCK, and the essence of rugby in Dublin is a black rock boy, to be a black rock boy. So he was the ultimate Dubliner, and he played rugby, schools rugby, and has wondered since then, and is an ongoing thread, why he never got picked for the Irish men's team. And he has 1,001 excuses for that along the way, but so funny, so a brilliant writer.
It says here, Paul Howard is an Irish journalist, author, and comedy writer, best known as the creator of the cult character Ross O'Carroll Kelly, a fictional Dublin 4 rugby jock.
That's him. That's it.
There you go. You're
and I'll give you a bundle of those, and you read them yourself.
I will. Any favorite comedians down over the years?
Jesus.
You ever see any stand-up or?
Yeah, everything. I mean, in Ireland, I loved Neil Tobin. I knew him well. See, I knew enough of the Irish guys well. I knew Joe Dolan well, and he was a comedian in his own right. Mm-hmm. He loved telling jokes. Then John Cleese had just no equal. Like Fawlty Towers, 12 episodes ever only, but he has enough comedy there, enough characterization there, enough everything there. He was so funny, unreal. And the you know, all those series, to be good, it depends so much on the minor characters, and he created great minor characters. No, there's lots of others. I mean, the Father Ted crew were absolutely brilliant. The Only Fools and Horses, just absolutely unreal again. There's very little of the new stuff though in that category. I haven't seen a lot of stuff that I'd say I don't want to miss that. I want to sit and watch, and you know, just taking Fools and Horses. The characters, the minor characters. You know, people like what's his name? Oh, shite. He died recently as well. Who used to call Dell's brother, who used to call him Dave.
Rodney.
Rodney.
Oh, Trigger.
Trig.
Trig.
But my name is Rodney. Okay, Dave.
I've got this mop. It's had 28 new heads and 36 new handles. And it's
Yeah.
the same broom.
It's the same broom. He won the prize for the best broom in the council. Yeah. And I mean, the two of them the night as Batman and Robin, and they're running through the mist in London.
O'Sullivan was the script writer. Absolute genius.
I mean, that was genius. Jesus.
They don't make them like that anymore.
No, they don't. Definitely don't. I mean, Neil Tobin was so good. I don't know if you've ever come across him. He's dead now as well, Cork fella, and he told jokes dead slow and easy going about, for instance, one where two brothers, without fail, one fellow would arrive in a couple of minutes late into school, in the national school, and always the brother would arrive in 10 minutes later. So the teacher said, I better do something about this. So he stops the first fellow coming in. Johnny, you're a couple of minutes late, but kept you. I was having my breakfast, sir. And what had you for your breakfast? I had an egg, sir. Right, well, sit down. On comes Jimmy, 10 minutes later. What kept you, Jimmy? Did you were late? I was having my breakfast, sir. And what did you for your breakfast? I had a boiled egg, sir. Right, hold on a second now. He says, your brother Johnny went in there 10 minutes ago, and he had a boiled egg, and he was in 10 minutes before you. But had I a spoon, sir? Had I? So he had to wait until your man had finished the fucking spoon. So brilliant again, just brilliant.
So I have one or two more questions, but that's pretty much it, really. What was your best trip abroad and why? Any favourite memories from overseas travel?
You see, well, I was lots of places. One of my favourite countries, my favourite cities in the world is a little place called Ljubljana in Slovenia. Beautiful old city, about 60 miles from the border with Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Escaped all the ravages of the Serbian War. I love it. I love lots of places. See, I worked in lots of places as well. I think I didn't tell you with my Aer Lingus thing, for instance, but Aer Lingus at that time, back in the 70s, used to lease aircraft, especially into Africa. But they would insist on all their own crew. So you'd have a pilot and a first officer and a navigator and a mechanic and yours truly, who was going to do the flight plan, weight and balance. And so I would have been in places like Chad and the Cameroon and Niger.
Timbuktu.
Timbuktu. I never landed in Timbuktu, but I'd be very aware of it, like in West Africa. But that's here's my little. Come over here and say hello to this man. I have been visited by my granddaughter. This, and do you know what she is? She is number one. Come over. Let me see. Now.
Hello.
Say hello, Carl. What number are you? Are you going shy? What number? Show him. Number one, yeah. Number one.
Number one.
Yeah. So you're not. I am. I'm okay. Will you take her out of your car? Hello. Hello. Sorry.
Hello and goodbye.
So,
how many grandchildren have you?
6.
And she's the eldest.
In Australia, would you believe?
I would. Yeah. Yeah.
He was home with us, and he's just come back.
The diaspora.
Yeah. Lovely kid, big boy. Only 11 years of age, and he's as big as myself.
Did you ever do any public speaking?
Not really. Something I never got into, which I could have done and did bits and pieces here and there, but only apart from doing things like introducing people on stage and that type of shit. I haven't really gone into public speaking.
Yeah. It's a real skill to be able to sort of stand up in front of a room and tell a story, like a raconteur or a storyteller. It's an kind of art form
yeah. And these guys that can do this in a very slow and measured way, and a bit like Tommy Cooper's version of Magic, where he deliberately fucked up and fucked up and fucked up, and then all that, just like that. But that to me, it takes incredible skill. The idea that you're there foostering over things, you're getting them wrong, and you're pretending that you're totally mortified by all this, and then it comes right for you, just like that.
Yeah, a lot of those characters, like Sir Tommy Cooper, I was reading about Peter Sellers as well. They had quite tortured personal lives and difficult personal lives, but they were huge celebrities on television.
Oh, unbelievable.
In the 70s.
Yeah, comedy in general, comedians in general. I used to know Noel V. Guinnessy extremely well. He was a very good Dublin comic, and he had a very tortured life, which we drank, and we spent quite a few hours on at the time about the dark places he'd go to, and he had no great explanation for it. In a lot of these cases, I believe, it's the high of entertainment and the height of adulation giving way to a sense of nothing when it is over.
There can't be anything more ecstatic for your ego than standing up in front of a room full of people, telling a joke and them all laughing. You must get a huge sense of sort of self-belief from that. So in your personal life, where you're just boiling an egg at home and there's no show, there's no audience, and you're just going about you, it must be a crashing sort of low compared to the highs. Maybe there's something in that.
And yeah, that's what I believed. And I spoke, as I said, this guy was like a leprechaun. He was maybe 5'3" with a beard, and he was very leprechaun-like and was very, very funny. But then, as he used to go into real dark places. But your man, he's come out recently. Your man PJ Gallagher,
right?
And he has really admitted that he has gone through hell. So it's you see, these guys then are tied to that career, and it can be very much touch and go. It can. You hit the nail on the head with the Bee Gees earlier, with the whole idea that you could be. I mean, it happened with Roy Orbison. Roy Orbison was massive in the 60s.
Yeah.
Then through the 70s, nobody wanted to know about him. This guy who had the greatest voice that ever sang a song. I mean, if you sit down and listen to the Traveling Wilburys, where he's with George Harrison and
Tom Petty
and Bob Dylan and your man from LEO.
ELO.
ELO. Yeah.
What was his name again?
I'll tell you in a moment.
They were brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely super. And the drummer they had called Jim.
You can see him. He's got the black curly hair.
That's him. I think we know.
The Traveling Wilbur. We're going to have to do this because
Traveling Wilburys, yeah.
I wanted to play this song at my father's funeral.
Yeah.
The End of the Line by the
Jesus. And the real sad part in that is the going to the rocking chair. They were all on rocking chairs, if you remember, and the rocking chair, obviously a Rise rocking chair and Rise guitar on it, and no Rai, because Rai passed away. Unbelievable.
I'm doing a little screen share there, and you can see it was Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Roy
Jeff
Orbison,
Lynne
and Tom Petty.
Yeah, Jeff Lynne.
They were brilliant, weren't they?
Unbelievable. But again, these were all huge stars who just came together as for the crack.
Natural.
And actually, Jeff Lynne tells a brilliant story about recording, or the first recording session.
They were another Manchester band.
Were they?
Yeah, I was surprised the Bee Gees were, but
they were very
so
good.
The
Bee Gees could have come back to Manchester, you see, but to my knowledge, they were born on the Isle of Man and immigrated to Australia.
Yeah,
until they were into their teens. But what were we talking?
Jeff Lynne.
Oh, Jeff, yeah. He got the
Mr. Blue Sky.
He'd have been a real organizer and a director of sorts anyway. But he had the studio set up, and he came in and he had the guys test for sound, and he had his settings set when Roy was running late, and he came out, opened his mouth, and literally blew all the settings off the fucking charts. He was actually in awe of Roy Orbison. So was everybody.
Who wouldn't be?
A very self-defacing man, didn't think anything very much of himself, and had an incredibly tragic life.
Yeah. They said George Harrison was very humble. George Harrison said he was just blown away to meet Roy Orbison.
Yeah. Well,
they were all blown away to meet George Harrison. It's like, yeah.
But George Harrison in the Travelling Wilburys becomes the real George Harrison.
Yeah.
He was just a great character who was just because he was with Lennon and McCartney, who had been the two writers. Even in some of their albums, he has written some great stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely great stuff. So
anyway. I'm getting conscious that we're running out of time. The only last question I've got for you, really, and you've touched on this with your out-of-body experience, come near-death experience. Have you got a glitch in the Matrix story? Has anything ever happened to you where you've had the opportunity to look upon this world as like a matrix or a software simulation, or just something very unreal has taken place that you couldn't explain?
I probably have been. Nothing jumps to mind straight away, but I do believe in this world, the biggest problem we have in the world, I really believe, is religion. Religion, and you guys summarized the whole thing so well with your Druidism the other day, and as I said to you at the time, this was the case all over the world. These weren't people who were traveling from A to B and bringing anything with them. This was a way people had of expressing themselves. And then we decided we would, religion by and large has been invented to control people.
Correct. Not just to control people's minds, but to control land and to control money.
Correct. So and look at all the wars in the world. Look at Palestine and the Israelis. That goes back to religion. Everything about it is religion, and it is. Look at Trump. Look at a very scary place at the minute. The world is, because Trump is such a loose cannon. You see, Trump.
I think there's a lot of false news about him, though. I see, for any individual to attract so much hate is quite unusual. There's normally something behind the hate campaign.
Yeah, but he has.
I think we'll see more with. I'd say hold off on making a judgment on him till we know the full story.
But the only thing, the scary part with him all the time is, in my estimation again, the ability to justify liking or wanting to like the likes of Putin. Now, why would he like to be? He'd love to be Putin, because if you had anything to say against him, I'll jail you, or I'll shoot you, or I'll put you, and nobody will ever hear about you again. Look at Navalny as an example. Poisoned in his own country and left to die on his own in a hellhole. And so that's what they do. Now, we, with our democracy, can be fucked up, good up in relation to lots of things, but at least there is some accountability there. Don't give me the guy who has no accountability to no one, only himself.
Did you have say a bad experience with religion personally?
No,
Or?
no. I just looked at why would we have, why would there be people in existence in the world 10,000, maybe 20,000 years, nobody really knows. And that 2,000 years ago, God decided to send someone to tell these people really who they were. And then, if that wasn't good enough, they sent Muhammad 1,500 years later, or 500 years later, or a number of hundred years later, to do likewise to a different group, but with a different message. It's the whole idea that everything is. I mean, just take the story of Adam and Eve. If Adam and Eve was even partly true, or anything to do with it, it would mean that you had brothers getting it off with sisters to fill up the earth, take the earth and fill it.
Or sons getting off with their mother.
Correct. Their mother, their sister, their granddaughter.
I think a lot of these, like, no disrespect to religious scholars, I've always been fascinated by philosophy of religion and religious philosophy and theology, but a lot of the stories we hear are just rehashed from older stories.
Mhm.
And I'm currently listening to an audiobook at the minute of the Bhagavad Gita. Hinduism is the oldest known religion to man. And in the ancient texts, the Vedic and the Sanskrit scriptures, they're talking about a time 300,000 years ago and 200,000 years ago.
Yeah.
The idea that the world was created 2,000 years ago is almost preposterous, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But when we know,
well, you can take it all with a pinch of salt. The stories. I love the ancient mythology connected with the land. I know you touched upon or alluded to briefly there a presentation me and my partner did to the group, the Midwest Mentoring Group, there on ancient spiritual tours. And we've a real passion for going to these ancient sacred sites. But if you can imagine a time 8,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, and you're talking stone circles, dolmens, cairns, nobody actually knows what they're doing there. We can only speculate. But I've got an idea for you. If 8,000 years ago, when the sun sets on the longest day of the year, say the solstice, or in the stone circle, the equinox, if 8,000 years later, when the sun sets, it's still casting the same shadow on the back, how can we be on a globe Earth, spinning around the sun and hurling through space? Everything we've been taught just all of a sudden doesn't stand up at all. Make that make sense.
yeah, but at the same, again,
it seems like we're on a fixed stationary plane and we haven't moved anywhere in 8,000 years if the same alignment of the stones is still aligned with the setting sun.
Yeah, but again, if you believe that this happens only for one moment of the year, in other words, you're spinning around there at a phenomenal rate in this oblong passage around the sun is not moving, to my knowledge.
I ain't buying that. I watch it traverse over the sky every day.
No, well, that's us twisting that way. Anyway, look, we won't go any further in relation
But
to that.
the point is, it's like we actually know very little when you look at what we know and what we don't know. There's a beautiful quote of yours which you have that I'd like you to share with us before we wrap up, and it's along the lines of an old Saint Aquinas quote. To those who know, no explanation is necessary, and to those who don't know, no explanation is possible.
Yeah.
Where did you get that from?
To those who understand, no explanation is necessary. Those who don't, well, where I came across it years ago anyway.
I love that quote.
Yeah. Because you see, there's none as blind as he or she that won't see, not that can't see. And if you're thick in the morning, more than likely you're going to be thick again in the evening.
Wow. So I think we're going to leave it there, John.
Carl, I enjoyed it. Good up.
Thank you so much for being a guest on the Menscape podcast.
Thanks a million for having me. It's good to talk back and there's tons of stuff there that I've left out. The only continent I haven't been on is South America. I've been on all the rest of them.
We may be heading to Peru at some stage this year as part of our research for ancient spiritual tours.
Brilliant idea. And someplace I'd like to go to. At this stage, I don't know whether I'll make it or not, but tell me about it at least.
Listen, best of luck with your health and with the shoulder, and if necessary, the operation.
Look, the shoulder, the real problem with the shoulder, Carol, is this, that I can't drive. You can only begin to imagine how fucked up that leaves you. It's totally pain. You're dependent all the time on somebody else to take you from A to B, and it was never me. But
you
again,
strike me as a very heavily sort of self-reliant and independent character.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've always created. I lived by the maxim that if whatever I was doing today hit the wall, within 3 months I'd be back with something else. And I've always I would reinvent. So
and that's a beautiful way for us to leave the Menscape podcast. Thanks again for your time, sir.
And thank you, Carl.
And God bless you.
And all the very best with that ancient spiritual. I hope it becomes absolutely huge. You deserve that.
Thanks a million.
Keep the faith.